Hi, welcome back to the part 2 of Spyderco military knife review. And last time we actually concluded the blade was too thin and a tip is too fragile. And now we're going on to the handle design. For a start, I've actually, as I mentioned in part 1, that I wanted to buy this knife for a long time, but I didn't actually buy it because I was hoping that Spyderco would come up with the next generation of this Spyderco military, because I didn't actually want a liner lock knife. According to Blade Ops test, liner lock is one of the actually weaker locking mechanisms amongst lock back and the compression lock and frame locks. So I was hoping that I would get maybe like someday Spyderco would make a compression locked Spyderco military. That would be awesome, but I couldn't wait any longer because I know they've actually made some changes to their model recently and they haven't actually made that upgrade. So basically liner lock, the other thing is you can actually see the liner here. That little tab actually can wear out relatively quickly in comparing with other locking mechanisms. And the other thing is the pocket clip is one position only on this knife. So as you can see, it's only just tip down right hand carry. So I was hoping that Spyderco, being one of the probably pioneers in terms of making pocket clips multiple carry. Actually, Spyderco apparently come up with pocket clips in the beginning. So I was hoping they would actually make their flagship model, Spyderco military, four-way positioned carrying, so giving like tap holes here as well as here and here and here and here, so you can carry the knife any way you want. But unfortunately, after all these years, they still haven't actually made that upgrade. And the other thing is that this is kind of like a minor issue, but I think for Spyderco military, they've actually tried to make this thing sort of stealth and all camouflaged. They should probably have just made the pocket clip also black. That would just make it sort of more sort of tuned in with the whole military theme. But this is not really that big an issue. I'm just thinking this is something they could do to actually improve the design. Coming to the next page, we this is one of the things that I felt like they should actually have improved. Like I mentioned in the part 1 video, this knife was, in the beginning when I first got it, it was actually a bit hard to flick open. Reason is that this knife, I don't think it's actually using the Spyderco, their own compression, the pivot bushing system. Pivot bushing system is just a little, basically they've actually made a little ring and fit the ring inside the blade, and put the screws on both sides, and as a result, the ring actually cushions the ring has the same thickness, or maybe just a hair slightly thicker than the blade itself, and any pressure or like excessive sort of like tweaking of the screws on both sides would just result the pressure of the liners sort of forcing onto the force onto the actual ring, the pivot bushing instead of the blade. So that as a result actually makes the users can tweak their knives and tighten the screws, but not actually make the blade very tight. They use this particular system on the Spyderco paramilitary model, but not on the military model, unfortunately. So it took me a little while for me to actually be able to do this, but now the knife actually is very smooth. I think in the future, or perhaps even in the current 2016 or 2017 Spyderco military model, they actually have a screw on both sides. I haven't actually got that new model, but that suggests to me that they've actually put that system in there. So if you know, or if you have opened the recent new model, you can actually just write in a comment and let me know. So next thing is the Spyderco military has a very small lanyard hole, which is sort of a somewhat limitation. This is as small a lanyard hole as really get, and the current new model in the picture I'll show you, a 2016 plus model, actually have a slightly bigger lanyard hole, allow you to put like a thicker lanyard into it, which is a good thing. So they have made some improvements, but the pocket clip is the major thing that I really want them to implement, as well as a compression lock. And as you can see, the screws here is actually quite small to fix the knife together, and this is something they addressed again in the later models, which has a bigger screw, and supposedly there have been user feedbacks complaining that the screws tend to strip once they take the knife apart. So I think maybe that's why they put like slightly bigger screws in there, which I guess is good. The knife actually is not entirely flow through. Having this backspacer, although it's very partial backspacer, and some users may not like that, but in my opinion, this backspacer is so small, it's providing more comfort and benefit than probably the downsides or the shortcomings. So I think it's not really that big an issue. Once again, the current Spyderco military model has a full flow-through construction, so it's all just pillars here instead of backspacer. And like the centering is slightly off, but I think that's really not that major issue to me. What I found as a slight quality issue is that the screw here on the pocket clip, it's very hard to see, and in fact I'm kind of like, you can probably sort of see that there's a slight space light coming through, because the top pocket screw, the top pocket screw here is actually slightly raised. It hasn't been completely tightened all the way. That's a bit of a minor issue. I think it's not going to affect the use, but I'd like to point it out that the Spyderco knives are not perfect. But overall, it's very high quality though. So there are a couple of things I'd like to say based on my speculation. The positive things being that the big belly is very easy to sharpen. From my experience, like knives with straight edge is very hard to sharpen on a bench stone, because straight surface meeting straight surface actually makes it hard to sharpen, because straight surfaces are not perfectly straight and they don't necessarily meet very well. But this, for being a very curved, very big bellied edge, you sharpen it on a bench stone. It's actually quite easy, because it just touches the bench stone sort of in a very small area, and that area being, the focal point of the sharpening, and you just run the entire edge through the sharpening stone. It's very easy. And the tip here is made very thin and very sharp. The reason I believe is they made this knife military is they intended this knife to be a backup knife should a soldier be sort of pushed on the ground and fighting hand-to-hand combat with some bad guy, and they pull out this knife and flick it open. That pointy tip here should be able to penetrate probably most of the body armors, unless it's specifically designed for knife attacks. So I think that's why they made it so thin and so pointy. And the liner here is slightly bead blasted, and liner here on the locking side is bead blasted, whereas as opposed to the side that's non-liner, the not locking side is actually so stone washed, very shiny. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but the reason I think is in fact Spyderco probably have hardened this side of the liner, the locking side, with special heat treatment to make it harder and harder to wear out, which I think is a good attention to make. But that's my speculation anyways. The liner seems to be wearing out consistently, just about very little since I got it. So I think their liner lock is actually reasonably good and durable, and it's just a very well designed line. As far as liner lock is concerned, I think it's very, very rigid, and I can't feel anything, any buckle, and nothing at all. So a couple of negative points based on speculation. Stop pin is fixed by screws. As you can see, this is the older model, and the current new model is actually just a solid pin that's put in between the liners. And I think the reason is that the stripping of the screws combined with probably the fact that they have to hold this thing with screws, it's just not overall a very, very robust design like the current model they make. And there is honestly, I think I wish there was like a slightly more pronounced hand guard here, just so that should you use a thrust attack, should you use the knife in a thrust attack, you could actually have more security. But I mean, this knife, the thumb ramp is sort of more serving as a hand guard somewhat. But yeah, I think it could be useful if we had a hand guard in here, or somewhat like a slightly more pronounced finger choil. Not too big an issue. And the other thing is you can't actually, I don't think you should use this knife as a bashing attack weapon, because in the back there's no solid backspacer to actually do that. It's actually fixed by a lanyard tube, which I think is pressed in. So if you do use it in a bashing attack, it's probably going to break the knife. So like do less damage to the attacker, do less damage to your opponent. So some final notes. Well, for a start, I really, really like this knife. Like I said, I've had my eyes on this knife for almost 10 years. I was just waiting for the next generation to come out, but I guess the overall design of this knife is just so well refined, and Spyderco probably never had any shortage of the purchase of this knife. They never felt the need of actually getting the next generation out to the market. I think there's rumors that they have been designing it. We just never actually would know that when they would come up with the next generation, with the compression lock as well as a 4-way pocket clip and don't quote me on this, probably a pivot bushing would be very, very nice. But yeah, overall I really love this knife. I was racing to grab this one before the new one, the late 2016 and early 2017 model comes up, because I like the backspacers here, and I really like this big round shiny, like sort of button looking screw head. The new one sort of doesn't actually look as nice from my point of view. And other things about the knife is that I think there's a common misconception that people think, oh, you call your knife military, this thing should be taking a lot of abuse, and I should be able to pry this, open the door and like maybe cut through batoning wood or something. I think that's just insane, because just because you call something military, it doesn't mean it has to take a lot of abuse. I mean, you don't see soldiers using their AR-15s or M16 rifles to dig a freaking trench just because it's issued a military, standard military issue. That's insane. I think the point is that, for a start, the Army guys or Navy SEALs or the military personnel, they have a lot of issues, a lot of weapons at their hands and like their standard rifle, and if that fails, they have got sidearm. Sidearm fails, they probably have like a fixed blade knife on them, and if that fails, you know, I think they probably screwed anyways. Having this military model, I think Spyderco had something in mind. For one, it's a very good sort of, relatively comparing with a fixed blade, it's a small sized knife for sort of more utilitarian use. And the other thing is, it's something you can use as a weapon should you have to, because this tip is very, very nice, like to pierce through just about any soft material. And I think most of the Kevlar-based body armor would not stand the thrust from this thing. I mean, if any knife can go through a Kevlar-based armor, that'll be this guy, you know. So I've seen a lot of YouTube videos made by like people, and they were like stepping this thing into freaking sheet metal and like stab it into wood and like and use the tip to like pry it back and forth and then break the freaking thing to half. And I don't know what people can sort of what idea they can get out of it, because physics suggest that anything of this thinness, this pointiness, you stab it into a freaking like wood and you pry it back and forth, it's gonna break into half. There's no doubt about it, you know. The Spyderco S30V steel is sharp, like it's actually heated treated very well, and it holds the edge really well as well, and it's relatively tough, but it's not indestructible. It's not Wolverine's claw, you know. You can't ask it to just be like an indestructible piece of equipment. Nothing is like that. So anyways, I've really liked this knife, and I hope you enjoy this knife as well if you have it. So in the end, I would like to show you this picture, which is from the Spyderco website, which, as you can see in here, it's actually a screw instead of just a pivot. And also in here, there's a pin instead of a screw. So they've actually made slight minor tweaking to their design to probably improve the quality and overall just sort of like design of the knife. But they haven't actually made a design like so big that they would call the knife completely a different, like military generation 2 or something. I don't really know why. And seeing that they've changed this knife model in the just recent, like a year or so, I was panicking, because I think they're not going to release the next generation for another 10 years. So I thought, well, I'm not going to wait any longer, so I'm going to get this one with the back spacer. And because I like the older, slightly older model with back spacer and the shiny pivot. So anyways, that concludes my review, and I hope you really enjoyed this video. And if you like this knife, I think you should go and grab one. And they come with all different like other steel compositions, like the s110v version or every other. Then they come up with the sprint run. And we'll see you next time in another review. Thank you very much for watching. See you.